The phrase good enough can land any number of ways depending on how it's emphasized. For some, it might seem rather ominous, like the kind of thing Boeing's executives would say about their planes right before takeoff. For me, good enough was a design philosophy that kept me from being too precious with my personal projects, allowing me to get them done on time rather than sitting there tweaking them forever. In the world of indie games, however, good enough can be kinda disastrous. There are so many games in just about every genre that simply being good isn't enough to help you stand out from the pack. And if there's a genre with a perceived glut out there, it's certainly the Metroidvania. Now, I have a thing or two to say about that, but the fact remains that you need to be more than just good to stand out on the Steam marketplace. Enter Kingdom Shell, a Metroidvania that does a lot of things right, but at the same time doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel or put much of a unique stamp on the genre. Can a game simply be good enough to merit playing it over other games on the genre? And how about those that have already played the best and are now looking at, in as little of a derogatory nature as I can phrase it, the rest? The story of Kingdom Shell involves a kingdom that has enjoyed a false sense of peace for hundreds of years, thanks to the existence of the titular shell. Only for that piece to be ripped apart like the shell itself when a half-demon overpowers the temple guards and unleashes a whole army of monsters and mutations on the populace. With no better option available, the remaining guards set free the half-demon's brother, in the hopes that he can tap into the same energy of the artifact known as the Black Glass that powers his sibling, in order to fight back against the creatures and put an end to the nightmare. You'll notice a few similarities to other games right off the bat. Whenever you reach a save point, you can equip inspirations, which is basically a badge system, giving you perks in exchange for equipment slots. The only way to increase the slots of the Black Glass is to find this particular jeweler in the Dwarven Mines, and he will only work in exchange for highly rare tokens. I only found enough to get 5 slots in my playthrough, and there's just a max of 6, with some inspirations taking as many as 3 slots. Still, they can be quite useful, like an inspiration that significantly improves your defense, or an inspiration that reduces pit and spike damage. So it's still worth finding them out in the world. In that sense, world exploration is generally pretty fruitful and rewarding. In addition to these inspirations, there are also increases to your health and mana littered around the world, as long as you can survive a platforming challenge to reach them and take them back to the entrance Celeste style, and lots of secret walls as well. If you can rescue these black hares from cages, you can increase your healing canisters and their potency, and defeating certain bosses will give you magic spells which not only serve a useful role in combat, but can also hit harder to reach places. That's where some of the Metroidvania aspect comes in, as well as your typical reach extenders like a double jump and air dash. And for the genre savvy out there, the map is okay. It's color-coded to the regions and has question marks for important rooms, but I wouldn't have minded dots for items like other game maps have. Most importantly, you can fast travel from any save point to another, and though they're sometimes pretty far apart, there are enough of them that they're pretty handy to get around. As you progress through the game, you'll make contact with the various factions of the kingdom, as well as this chill floating cloud man that end up helping you out despite the chaos you'll inevitably be sowing. Now, most of that isn't your fault. It's not like you planned on being attacked by the queen, who can now float and shoot a bunch of swords at you, and the Mountain King seemed like kind of a prick anyway. But you are essentially taking out a bunch of the ruling class one by one, and few of the citizens seem that bothered by it, so I guess this game is pretty based? These bosses aren't the most complex in the world. In fact, several of them don't even have a second phase, but there's a good amount of them and they're all relatively quick fights, so I'm not too bothered by it. I think I was only truly disappointed by the final boss fight, which was broken up into 2 separate bosses, neither of which had many patterns. The combat in general is just kinda serviceable, a lot of melee punching and the occasional dodge roll. It's definitely not the strongest in the genre, and that may partially have to do with the game's animations feeling a bit awkward. I don't have a huge problem with the look of the game overall. It's generally pleasant to look at, but the character animations can look pretty odd. Your sprint, for example, looks less like a run and more like you're confidently strutting down the runway. And so there's a lack of crunch from this animation, as well as no complex comboing, that makes the combat feel flat and too basic. So these issues aren't enough to make the game bad, but I hope by now you're seeing what I mean about that phrase, good enough. This is a real meat and potatoes Metroidvania that doesn't punch above or below its weight class. It's largely fine, sometimes quite good, but is that enough to warrant a purchase? I brought up at the beginning of the video how the Metroidvania genre is in a glut. At least, that's what people claim. I kinda see it differently. Sure, if you just go by the Metroidvania tag on Steam, there's a lot of games out there. But a lot of those games aren't exactly tagged correctly. Yes, I'm that pedantic nerd who insists that Metroidvanias only qualify if they have ability gating. When it comes to actual true blue Metroidvanias, there aren't really a ton that come out every year, and even rarer are the good ones. I've played a hell of a lot of them over the years, and if there's anything I've learned, it's really easy to take what should be a slam dunk and ruin it. Whether it's via tedious backtracking, overly repetitive enemy spawns, poor map or UI, or just flat out bad controls and jumping. My top 40 for 2024 only had one game that could really qualify, unless you count the Zelda likes. And some of the bigger games to come out over the last few years have definitely disappointed people. So, in actuality, a Metroidvania that's good enough actually is valuable in the year 2025. Look, sure, Kingdom Shell isn't Hollow Knight, but eventually you'll have played Hollow Knight and you'll need something else. And you're sure not gonna be getting it from Silksong anytime soon, heyo! Having put in 7.5 hours into Kingdom Shell and finishing with a 98% completion, I'd say it's good enough, parentheses, complimentary. Maybe it's Aldi brand Metroid rather than General Mills, but Aldi brand is still pretty good. Thanks for watching this video, and a special thanks for watching my Game of the Year video and helping it to cross 10,000 views. I can't guarantee I'll do more super long videos like that, but I'll try to keep recommending indie games, retro games, and soon, animated films and TV shows. Yeah, it's been a while, but I'd like to get back into that. I'm still recovering from a sickness, so my voice has been kinda shot in this video, but I hope you still enjoyed it anyway. In the meantime, you can sign up for my Patreon and I'll get new videos up a few days before they go live on YouTube, as well as other bonus content. On Tuesday, I'll be talking about this month's Patreon Voters' Choice, Spyro Season of Ice for the Game Boy Advance. Until then, you'll find me in another castle.